and I'm going to read a story from my memoir, Incandescence, Rising Above Darkness. Today I'm reading Deported, Transported. Then I will show some art that's also in the book, 68 pieces of art. And then we'll answer questions that have been sent in. So we're going to first thank the Minnesota State Arts Board for awarding me a grant to do these live reads, and then thank you again for being here. I feel you, and I love this way of connecting in these virtual visits. Walk lightly on the planet while connecting with you all around the planet. There are people in countries far away, and we don't have to get in an airplane or drive and contribute to climate change or greenhouse gases. We can visit with each other in this very eco-conscious way, and I love that. So let's get right into the story. This is chapter 24. The story is called Deported, Transported. If you heard that, we have some holiday decor still up outside that seems to be reflecting into our camera and telling us someone's at the front door. So it's just the holiday spirit, even though I'm dressed for spring because I just felt like it. And it is spring in some places, so let's bring the spring.
Alrighty.
All right, once again, here we go. 24, chapter 24, Deported, Transported. On my way to a remote island off the west coast of British Columbia, I got deported from Canada, which oddly turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. I would not have thought traveling with my father was a good idea if I knew that he had been molesting a child for years, or that he set me up to be raped by his barroom buddy. But I did not know these things until years later. When I agreed to go live on Valdez Island with him, the worst I thought could happen would be isolation. I've always loved being close to nature, in serene environments, and had an enormous ability to stay inspired creatively. Solitude is fine with me, in fact, usually preferred. So I imagined it would be a fine situation because I had no idea of the danger that he had hidden from everyone. Looking back, it is a wonder I survived and I can write this now. I have no religion because I see how it divides people instead of bringing them together. Most believe their beliefs are correct and the other people's are not. I believe what spiritual beliefs have in common is what matters, and that is love, truth, and compassion. These are the principles I believe in. Maybe because I believe in these things, this is what is true in my life. Perhaps there is a benevolence in the universe that watches over me because I believe there is. Could this loving, invisible force have orchestrated my deportation, transporting me away from danger? As with all the deepest questions I may ponder, I may never have an answer. Certainly, I have gone through some very painful stuff, but all of it has made me more understanding, tolerant, broad in my scope, so I do not regret any of it. Somehow, I have come through much without losing hope. Perhaps this is proof enough of the invisible innocence and ineffable love. I am grateful that somehow I did not end up on a remote island with my pedophile father. Instead, the border guards searched his vehicle until they claimed they found a teaspoon of marijuana seeds. How did I know to immediately claim they were mine? Did I see it as an escape from the danger I had not yet consciously known was there? Do I have an invisible guardian watching over me, giving me a way out? Do I have common sense that told me to say they were mine in order to be taken away from the harm that certainly would have been in my future if I had continued to be with my father? Most likely, I will never know how this event happened or why my instinctive, immediate choice was to say it was my trunk they were found in. But I do see how it saved me from peril, and I am grateful. Because I said the seeds were in my trunk, they arrested me. I hated the feeling of being locked behind bars under someone else's control, but somehow I was confident that I would be fine. The sheriff's wife brought me a huge plate of fresh vegetables when she heard I was a vegetarian. I thanked her even though I was not hungry. Later, when she came to pick up the tray and saw I could not eat any of it, she came back and pretended to be washing the walls just to keep me company. I was too upset to speak, but it was comforting that I could feel her concern. A little later, I was brought before the judge in the same building. He never looked at me, but kept his eyes on his desk, shuffling papers. I felt he did not want to be swayed by seeing my youthful innocence. I pled not guilty because I believed the guards put the seeds in my trunk to keep us out of Canada. I did not blame them for disapproving of my father. He made no attempt to be acceptable on any level ever. His long hair and full beard, hippie clothing in a truck with a homemade shell covered with paintings by my brother of plants that looked like they grew on another planet. Everything about my father and his truck stood out as anti-establishment. He telegraphed his disdain for anything conventional. I wore only my own handmade moccasins and baggy beige clothes, no jewelry or makeup, with my hair long and straight, the way it grows naturally. I dressed like that way in an attempt to call no attention to myself. My desire to be invisible only made me stand out. Most thought I must have been a member of a spiritual community no one had yet heard of. Me claiming the seeds were mine threw their plans off, and no one knew what to do. Without my knowledge or approval, my father called my brother, who paid the $300 fine, and the Canadian guards took me to the border and said I would have to walk across the border to the American side. My father was not there to see me off, nor did he give me any money. I had only the handmade clothes I was wearing and an over-the-shoulder bag containing my bamboo flute, journal, a pencil, a small knife, roasted soybeans, dried nuts and fruit, and $12 cash. When I got to the guard on the American side, he insisted on getting me a ride. And when a safe-appearing couple crossed, he asked them to drive me south. I was too traumatized to speak. They were sweet and stayed silent along with me. I asked them to take me to a gas station at the edge of town. There I waited until a single mother came in for gas and asked her for a ride. I drew with her children and kept them happy while she drove. Mothers would always offer me food and shelter. In one woman's house, she left her kids with me while she went shopping. I would cook, clean, repair anything I could while watching over the kids. None of the kind people wanted me to leave, but I needed to get back to my mother. She was the only person I felt I could tell my truth to, and I needed to speak about what had happened to heal. Only once in the almost 1,500-mile journey from Creston, Canada to my mother's house in Southern California did I stand by the road hitchhiking. In Eureka, there were so many hitchhikers, I had no choice. So I made a cardboard sign with a drawing of the Golden Gate Bridge and stood at the end of a long line of hitchhikers with a huge sign in front of me so no one could see me. I politely turned down a number of rides. No women ever stopped. I accepted a ride from someone I thought was a gentleman. He was Dutch, and he called me his nature girl. He did a lot of talking, and I listened as he took me all the way to my mother's house. I arrived with the same $12 I was deported with and transported back into serenity. Thank you.
Yay! Bravo! Bravo!
Thank you, thank you. So, Bodhi, would you come show the piece of art that's after or before the story? As I've said, there's 68 pieces of art in our self-published Incandescence Rising Above Darkness. And the stories...
I gotta move it around a bit because there's some reflections. But
right. This piece is called Anhinga Kimono, and it's in our acid-free glassine sleeve. We make these prints here at the Emerald Lady. Bodhi learned how to make museum quality prints of my art, and they're numbered, signed with a certificate of authenticity, and we get to charge a reasonable price for them because we don't have anyone else we have to pay. They can go straight to you, and I think art is for everybody, so I love having affordable prints in small, medium, large. So
and you can get these prints at clarecooley.com/shop.
which is the shop that Bodhi made. Being technically adept, he made me a shop for my art that has a lot of my art. And I'm so grateful that we are, as he asked me to work with him, Mother-Son Productions, and that he has completely different skill set than I do, but we're a good team that help round each other's skill sets out, and we help each other get ever closer to our potential as artists. We get to live doing the work that gives us the greatest sense of purpose, and I believe is the best contribution that I can give to the world is my art that's about the beauty of nature, though I have done some 7 cities at sunset while traveling around the world. Prague was really inspired me, and I have done a couple human beings. I'm generally, though human beings and cities made by human beings are also an extension of nature, I'm mostly inspired by the natural world, unaltered by humans, and the idea of living in harmony with it, and it being a healthy place where we can go to replenish, be serene, live in harmony with each other and it. So that's what my art is full of. Lots of birds. I love the idea of flying. So let's start some questions that were sent in.
One moment. Jenny asked, how do you decide what would make a good story?
The first question I ask myself is, did I learn something important through going through the events in the story. And then the next question I ask myself, is it a story that has universal lessons that other people could get something out of? And some of my stories I have, probably most of them, I have shared verbally before I wrote them, so I got to see the reactions of others. And in fact, that's why I wrote my memoir, because so many said my stories helped them and could help other people, so I should write it. So thank you to everyone who said that, and I did it.
Nice. Tom asked, where do you find the courage to share your true stories?
It is my belief that we all have as much courage as we choose to access, as we need for the different things that we go through in life. And we do have to have faith that if we take on a challenge like sharing your truth, that you will find the courage to do it. And facing the fear of sharing our truth is very empowering. And it is my belief that people trying to be appropriate and not speaking about things they think other people will judge or writing about them is a disservice to the individual and the world. I believe that it is better if we all share our truths at the right time, in the right way. I'm not suggesting everyone should write them, and I'm not suggesting that everything is for public. Sometimes it's just for us.
Great. I put the book down in the corner there because it wasn't really showing before.
Oh, there's the book, yes.
You can show it to Instagram and YouTube while I just pick it up because they can't really see it. Facebook can. There you go.
There it is. And like I said, 52 stories, 68 pieces of art, 40 photographs. I'd suggest the color version because of all that art and photographs. It's a couple dollars more. I don't make any more for it, but it is, in my opinion, worth a couple more bucks to get the color version. The art is very important to me. It's an important part of my life story and how I've healed and found a higher purpose through, creative reverie and sharing it. So it's a very important part of my story, and very little of the art is literally connected to the stories. There's a few pieces, Eye of the Whale, a big painting of an Eye of a Whale, but most of them are moments of natural meditation, just a moment to deep breathe between stories and take in a moment of serene nature.
And Susan asked, do you, let me see, what did she say? Susan said, are you concerned you will be judged?
People judge each other, themselves. It is the biggest block to being creative is judging ourselves or being judged by others. And it will happen, but I try to remind myself it's always about them. It's never really about us. When I'm happy and rested, I don't even feel the urge to judge anyone else. I have, like everyone else, had times I'm exhausted, frustrated. I even struggled a long time ago, had jealousy because I was so exhausted when Bodhi was an infant, nursing every 2 hours, night and day, and I looked at this woman at this social event when I hadn't had enough rest and said, oh, anybody can look good if they've had enough rest. And I said to myself, wow, go home and take a nap. And so we judge others when we don't feel good about ourselves. We're jealous when we're not getting what we need. So I remember that about myself, and that is true of other people. If they're judging me, it's about them, not me. And it can hurt at the time. It has. I've had people blame me for being molested. That really hurt. But I've come to accept that some people prefer blaming the victim because they think that makes them safer, that they could stop it from ever happening to them or their loved ones, that we have control over being a victim. But the truth is, bad things happen to good people for no good reason. And the world has a lot of unfairness in it. And so be, kind, be courageous, and accept that. Don't judge others.
Nice. And Erica Bree wrote, you write about your dreams as you write your memoirs. She asked that as a question. So, do you write about your dreams as you write your memoirs?
As I write stories, there are dreams that play a part in them. In fact, the very first story I wrote from my life, called Hummingbird Heart, about my older sister passing, I talk about the dream that I had right before it happened that I believe somehow portended her passing. And I have a theory I've also written a story about my mother's passing, that I had a dream before that happened, my father's. And I think we put this structure on time so that we can deal with it. And in the universe, we know the faster you go in the universe, the slower time moves. So there could be a place, a way that time actually crosses over itself like a Mobius strip. And sometimes we can access that moment that it crosses over the past or the future and see things that haven't happened yet, or see things that happened long ago that are very vivid. I don't have any scientific explanation for it, but I don't need to, because I've experienced it and I trust it. So my dreams do get woven into my stories. They've always been important to me. One little story that isn't in my book about my father. I wished him, good night, sweet dreams, when I was little, and he told the story about how he said, oh, I don't dream, and I cried, which was very unusual. I was a stoic child. And he told me, in retelling the story years later, that he had to tell me real dreams and the colors in them before I would believe that he did dream, because it was upsetting to me to think that he didn't dream.
And Tigger Tiramisu, I love the serendipity in this story. Do you believe humans are inherently good or inherently bad?
I believe that we have the same amount of DNA with the bonobos as the chimpanzees. The chimpanzees, males will kill infants in order to get the mother to mate with them. They'll kill each other. They can be extremely brutal. But the bonobos, it's a matriarchal society where the females disperse the food. And they will, if a young usually male, adolescent bonobo is hostile and or tries to steal food that hasn't been shared with him, the older females, they will be very stern and they can hurt him, but they never kill them. And the other thing about the bonobos, which were discovered much later than the chimpanzees, but like I said, we have the same amount of DNA in common with both. One species, and they never kill each other themselves. The other can be very brutal and kill, infanticide even. The bonobos also resolve conflict sexually by pleasuring each other, and they're kind of like the hippies of the primate kingdom, free love, I guess. So my answer is, I believe people can be either or and both. Not violent or violent. And do some of us come from bonobos who are not violent? Do some of us come from chimpanzees? Who knows? But I do know that we can choose to resolve conflict peacefully. And of course, it's what I hope people do. And I believe we can. We don't have to be violent. And it makes better movies, stories, more exciting. So that myth that people are violent, it's part of their nature, is getting promoted by the industry to sell books and movies. And I'd like to be an advocate for it's tougher not to be violent to resolve conflict.
Which I think is interesting because your book certainly has depictions of violence that occurred in your life.
Yes.
So how do you square that? It's with,
Well,
your story depicts violence, but
Those-
isn't about glorifying it.
As I've said to my son, who's a movie maker, and you're all hearing him talk, as well as me periodically through these, that there was a time when I was like, I should want revenge for what my father did, what the rapist did. And I almost was ashamed of myself for not wanting to be violent as a response, like I was weak or cowardly or, was something wrong with me. And then I realized, no, I'm kick-ass kindness. I will defend my own innocence or other people's innocence, but fortunately, thus far in life, I haven't had to resort to violence to do so. And I'm very proud of that. And violence does happen. It happens in nature, but there's no malice. That's the difference between animals and humans. There is malice in humans, and I believe it's people get wounded and they pass their wounds on instead of healing themselves and accepting and forgiving those that have hurt them, understanding that they hurt them because someone hurt them and they didn't have the wherewithal to heal themselves, so they passed on the pain. And the tougher ones heal themselves and don't pass on the pain. They're the ones I respect the most.
Peter asked, does telling your story make you feel vulnerable?
Yes. And it does take courage, and I have to choose to do it every time I tell a story in person or write a story, read a story. But I believe the truth, as they say, sets us free. We can only heal what we admit. And I believe that the world needs to know how much happens in it, and especially to children and women and people that have vulnerabilities from their age, being very young or being older, being their ethnic backgrounds, their economic situations, all of those can be disadvantages that make us vulnerable. And we shouldn't be ashamed of our vulnerability, we should admit it, and we shouldn't let anyone take advantage of our disadvantages. And the more we speak of it, I believe the more fair people can be and more understanding. And that's what I want to be part of.
Delightful.
Sarah asked, why not make up a fictional story instead of your real life?
Well, I may do that in the future, and I have respect for fiction. In fact, fiction, I believe, can be even more revealing than the truth because it reveals our dreams and hopes and wishes in what we make up. But I also believe nothing is as powerful as the truth. And I first told my stories to heal. Then I started sharing my stories to help others heal. And it's been an empowering and powerful journey. And I don't think any fiction can be as powerful as our truth, though, like I said, it can reveal our hopes and dreams and wishes and tell other stuff about us, and it's totally valid, and we can learn beautiful things from fictional stories, so I respect them.
Drew, do you feel it again when you recall difficult events? If so, how do you get through that?
Well, I think sometimes we have to feel things a number of times before we take the heat out of it. The pain is dispersed, evaporates. And I believe that it is good for us to do that, to keep telling our stories, keep reading our stories, keep writing our stories, whether we share them with others or one other person, one sacred witness. That part of the healing process is when we can get through it without any anguish or suffering, we know we've healed it. And that's our duty, is to heal ourselves. So, and it's our opportunity to be happier.
Victor, how do you stay happy?
Nobody stays happy all the time. Some people pretend like they are because that's socially acceptable, but returning to it regularly is the best any of us can actually do, and that's good enough. I believe, as I like to say, go quickly, expeditiously through the difficult feelings and luxuriate in the pleasant feelings. So feel it all. Don't be afraid to feel everything and anything. Express it. Stimulate your immune system by expressing it. Creativity is a way we can express anything and everything respectfully, which is why I love the arts and have so much respect for creative expression. But come back to happiness. Figure out what makes you happy and visit it regularly.
Constance, why do people blame victims?
Well, I mentioned a bit about this earlier. I believe it took me a long time to forgive the people that blamed me for some of the stuff that's happened to me in my life. That was really hard. It can be even harder than the assault to be blamed for an assault. but I came to understand that they just couldn't bear the idea of living in a world where terrible things can happen for no reason. We can't always count on being able to protect ourselves, no matter how smart or cautious we are. Sometimes tragic things can happen, and there are people that can't bear to believe that that could happen to them or someone they care about, so they choose to blame the victims as if they're in control of never being a victim. And victim became like a pejorative thing. No, sometimes we are victims and there are victimizers, and we shouldn't be ashamed of having been a victim, being a victim. The person who's victimizing, they've got some shame to face, and I hope they do and stop doing that. But don't be ashamed of having been a victim or being a victim. Nothing shameful about it. And I'm part of the reason I started telling my truth at 25 is I realized how seldom people do. And that way people don't know how often like rape can happen in this world. And until we accept it and speak of it, we can't make it better. So don't be ashamed. Be proud.
Philip, how do you deal with it if people judge you?
I spoke about this earlier too. It's always about them. I had a man, and I've said this at one of the other live reads, this one is a really interesting moment in my life. A man who I'd never met before came up to me and said, "You've done so much, you must know what it's like to fail." And I said, we look at life very differently. I never fail because I learn from everything I do. And I do not judge myself for it not being what I thought I wanted it to be. It gets, creative expression becomes what it is, and I respect that. And if it's different than what I imagined, it's not a failure, it's just different. And I feel compassion for people that go around judging and blaming and shaming. That's the world they live in, but I don't live in that world, and I'm not going to let them draw me into their negativity.
Ed, how do you get past getting blamed for stuff you weren't responsible for?
Well, there we go. I've had to say to myself, I did nothing to bring this on. There's nothing I could have done to prevent it. I was and am innocent. I didn't deserve it. And I get to heal and not be ashamed of it happening to me, because I deserve to be happy and feel lovable and get to love. So I don't have to let their confusion be mine.
And Erica asked another question. Have you thought about translating your book to other languages?
Thank you, Erica. Yeah, yes, and that time will come, and I hopefully it'll be pretty soon. It could be, well, obviously I'm going to need help with that, so it's a step I haven't gotten to yet, but it is something I definitely want to do.
Great question.
All
Yeah.
these questions are great. Thank you, Erica, and everybody else.
Yeah, we have a learning process about how to do that and which languages to do first, and it'll be exciting to share updates with you guys about that. Shelley asked, should we confront or forgive people who blame and shame us?
If they're blamers and shamers, confronting them will probably just draw us into a painful situation that won't have a positive outcome. So I stand up for myself without, as best I can, without, you know, trying to embarrass or one-upmanship. I just tell people, like, we look at life very differently. And, you know, when people try to blame or shame me, I just, sometimes it's an inner voice that says, nope, I'm not taking that on. And sometimes I speak it. And nope, no thank you. Hope you forgive yourself for whatever you need to forgive yourself for, so you can be nicer. I have said something like that out loud when someone said something really cruel in a room with the volume intended for everyone in the room to hear it and to embarrass me. So I just hope that they could forgive themselves for whatever they needed to.
Celine asked, where do your creative ideas come from?
Oh, everywhere. Nature, my own feelings, dreams, things people say, a desire to share something that I think would make my life more joyous, create something that I need, want, and I always ask myself, what is it good for me? Is it good for the world? Does it hurt anyone else? And if it's good for me, good for the world, and it doesn't hurt anybody, that's all I need to know to try it. And that gives me a lot of creativity to work with.
Matt asked, how do you decide which idea you should do?
If I have a really strong inspiration, I, you know, use that motivation, that energy to get it going. And I try to be organized enough so that I don't get sidetracked, distracted on the way to finding the materials or the tools I need, so that I get an inspiration, I can just go and do it. And if I start something, I have committed over the years, a long time ago when I realized I am an artist, that's what I want to be in this life, is to finish things. So if I start something, I'm committed to finishing it instead of starting this and then going to that and starting that and then going to something else. But sometimes I take breaks and go from one thing to another to stay fresh and to keep some objectivity, but I finish.
Connie, how do you stay inspired?
Well, inspiration is like happiness. It comes in waves, and there are troughs, and there are times to rest and be still, meditative. Nobody's inspired all the time. I have learned over the years of doing many different kinds of creative projects that sometimes I don't feel the inspiration until I say to myself, well, you're gonna spend this time you have on this, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever. And then I start, and the inspiration comes after getting to work.
Okay. And Jason asked, how do you focus until you finish a project?
It's a choice, and I say to myself, I am so fortunate that I have believed in creative expression and myself throughout my life and kept it going even when I was taking care of my mother and my 2 nephews without financial assistance from anyone else as a waitress or framing art, or I still every day had some creative time, and I kept it going. And now I get to spend most of my time doing my creative inspiration. And so if I have a moment where I'm like, I don't want to work on this, I say to myself, don't be spoiled. Appreciate you have this time. Do you know how few people in this world even have enough to eat regularly and to feed their children? And so if you have time to do explore your own creativity, you are very, very fortunate, and use it, appreciate it. And that little pep talk gets me right back into focus.
Paul asked, how do you know when a story or painting or any creative project is done?
It is an inner guide. And when my mother passed, it was very hard for me to finish a painting for a long time, because she was my sacred witness. And if I thought something was done and I showed it to her and she said, oh yes dear, that looks done, done. It wouldn't matter what, if every other art critic in the world would tell me something wasn't done, if my mother and I thought it was done, I was confident and secure. And it took me a long time to realize that I have that voice within me, even though she's no longer alive. And so I still ask her if something looks done and feels done. And it's more about the feeling than the look. And sometimes me and everybody can get intoxicated by the details and the process, so I almost always have several things going at the same time so that I don't overdo, because you can just get into it and enjoy doing it and then lose the light, I call it. So I step back regularly, and when it feels done, it's done, and I go to the next thing, and it is a feeling.
Abigail said, sometimes I feel I don't have the creative gene. Can anyone become more creative?
Absolutely, everyone can, and I believe it's a very joyous thing to constantly be seeking more depth and more freedom in our creative expression. There are areas for me that are very challenging, and it's very, very fulfilling to explore those areas and to talk to the negative critical voice within myself and say, I'm having fun here, I'm gonna just play. So it's not your time, critical voice, to tear me down. If you don't have something constructive to say, then you can be quiet, and we can all play more, explore more, to become more creative. And it's joyous and healing and life enhancing, so go for it.
A question from Jill, where does inspiration come from?
Inspiration, I think there's a childlikeness in all of us throughout our lives, and some people's duties and responsibilities and worries overshadow that playful, curious part of us that all little children have, and we have to nurture it and protect it and love it and be kind to it and gentle with it, and then we will increase the inspiration coming if we know it's safe. We are our own children. We're our own inner child. We are the guardian of our own enthusiasm and playfulness and free association and So we have to be kind and gentle as if we are our own child.
Stacy's comment, thank you for sharing your wonderful words and wisdom with us. Why do you think some people are more creative than others?
Some people have had their creativity nurtured by someone loving and protective, their mother, father, aunt, uncle, teacher, the bus driver on the way to school. It can be that simple, that someone helped us believe in ourselves as we were growing up and explore, gave us permission and encouragement. And it can be as simple as people shutting us down, telling us we couldn't sing on key, we dance like a clod, the sun doesn't look like that. We've all heard critical things, and it can get us to hide. Our creative spirit is very vulnerable and tender, and before we know how to protect it, people can hurt us and get it to retreat. So we have to nurture it, tell it it's safe now. I'm not going to let people judge and hurt you and say, unkind things.
Clare Boiseneau said, I am enjoying your tips for encouraging oneself to create and to be inspired.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. It's greatly gratifying to take the stuff I've learned, especially that a lot of it came through hard times, and turn it into something that can help others. That is really a beautiful thing to do with the struggle and pain in our life, is to turn it into something that helps us be happier, more joyous and expressive, and can help others. That's turning it to the good, and it's my life choice, and it's great that I get to.
All right, and though we have more questions, we're going to have to address them next time. So if we didn't get to your questions this time, we keep a record of them, and we'll get to them next week.
Yes, and I love them, and I really appreciate people sending in questions. It really, really helps me. Thanks to each one of you for being here, and thanks again to the Minnesota State Arts Board for awarding me a grant to do these live read virtual visits, and thanks again to Abigail Blonigan and Perfect Duluth Day for the recent article they did, which you can see on my profile or on incandescencebook.com. Come back at 4 for Bodhi's reading from his sci-fi thriller Northport 99, and he's also going to be sharing how to promote and get support for your creative writing. Through his choice has been Patreon, but there's a number of ways to do it, and he's going to walk you through that process. His YouTube channel is Bodhi the Movie Maker. My YouTube channel is The Creativity Show. We really appreciate it if you pass the word to others. We're a couple of artists that aren't very good at promoting things. We're trying to learn how, and we really appreciate you spreading the word. And you can see any of my live read videos anytime on my YouTube channel, The Creativity Show. And same with Bodhi's, Bodhi the Movie Maker. And you can share them with anyone you like. So see you next Saturday at 2 for my next live read. And meanwhile, stay curious and stay creative.
All right, thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.